an analysis of the overall crime, the risk level that the subject took, the victim risk level, analysis of the area, maybe the crime scene, maybe you have multiple crime scenes, and then based upon that, you attempt now to come up with a specific type of profile.
By examining every aspect of an unsolved crime, a profiler can determine specific characteristics of that killer, such as age, occupation, and physical characteristics. The troopers contacted the FBI to see if the Bureau could work up an analysis of the Anchorage killer. They hoped the profile would sharpen the investigation and bring overlooked clues to light. The troopers gave the FBI what they needed to build the behavioral profile. For a scrupulous, accurate profile, they required only facts from the troopers, no analysis or theories. Trooper Wayne Van Clausen didn't want to lose any time. The information he received from Officer Baker aroused his suspicions about Robert Hansen, but he needed more information. Criminal records were just beginning to be computerized, and he didn't have access to them all in Anchorage. While the profile was being developed, he went to Juneau to collect Hansen's records from the Superior and Supreme Court archives. In his fact-finding mission, Van Clausen researched every town that Hansen had ever lived in. He found reports on Robert Hansen dating back to 1961.
Radio traffic.
He gathered all that he could carry, sent the rest by truck, then headed home. While he was in Juneau, the FBI had come through with a criminal profile of the serial killer. The fact that the killer was so prolific meant to Douglas that he could function unnoticed within the community. Someone who worked independently, most likely a business owner. The killer would be an avid outdoorsman, since the bodies were recovered in remote areas of wilderness. Since he preyed on prostitutes, Douglas concluded the killer had difficulty talking to women, had low self-esteem, and grew up feeling like an outcast.
We are not veteran.
Based on killers with similar profiles, Douglas provided a specific characteristic to explain the cause of those feelings of inadequacy. A feature that bore an eerie resemblance to Robert Hansen.
The one that totally blew us all away, I think, is that when they said he's either going to be a stutterer or someone who has a lisp, a speech defect. How do you figure that? But that was one of the things that they suggested might show up.
The FBI profile pointed to Robert Hansen, but the depths of Douglas's insight were about to be known. Upon Van Clausen's return, troopers studied the files. The records showed that Hansen had spent 3 years in a reformatory for setting fire to his old high school's bus garage. Based on their work with previous killers, the FBI profilers said the killer would have a history of arson.
You have a boyfriend?
Yes, actually I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
The profile painted the killer as a social misfit.
We are not that call.
Hansen's court-ordered psychiatric reports from his days at the reformatory bore this out.
Not boyfriend, girl.
I'm really busy right now, you know.
I don't mean anything like.
His stutter was a social barrier that undermined his self-confidence.
We are not the fire department.
Whenever he tried to assert himself, he'd be slapped
I have a lot of
down.
work to do, or I'm gonna call security on you.
Yes, we have many wheels. We are
He
not
never
that
forgot
call.
the stain. The profile said the killer would learn to function as a normal member of society while his perversions festered within. His record showed that in his 30s, Hansen began working at a bakery. He would brag to co-workers about his kleptomania and the sense of power it gave him. He also bragged about his love of hunting. He took great pleasure in exerting power over his prey, stalking it, then wounding it,
Yes, we have many
and he became
wheels.
good at the kill, winning prestigious awards.
You cannot control
In
heat.
1967, he moved to
The
Alaska
wind
to start a
is
new
good
life
for power
and for
generation.
better hunting. 3 years after moving there, his record showed he was arrested for the attempted
Iran,
rape of a young
1979.
receptionist at gunpoint.
The worst hostage crisis in American history
He pleaded no
begins.
contest to assault with a deadly
Unknown
weapon.
to the world at the time, U.S. Embassy staff escape and find their way to the house of Canadian diplomats, where they spend 85 days
A little more
in
than a
hiding.
month later, he was indicted for the attempted assault of an 18-year-old woman who followed home.
More than potential was that we would be
As soon as the man got to
When the
Alaska,
Central Intelligence
he was
Agency
involved
learn
in
of the
theft
Americans
cases.
on the run,
He was involved
they
in
assign one of their
abductions.
top escape agents,
He
Tony Mendez.
had psychiatric evaluations showing him to be really unstable and having all kinds of weird sexual fantasies and the rest.
True to the profile, Hansen seemed a respectable citizen, so the courts were lenient. In one case, he
get
claimed
them
to have
out.
memory lapses and was given
He comes
psychiatric
up with an
treatment and 5
extraordinary
years
plan
in a work release
to walk the
program.
diplomats out of Iran.
He
in broad
abducted one of his
daylight,
early
posing
victims
as a
outside a
Hollywood
coffee
film
shop,
crew.
took her to a cabin
It was
in
a
the
perfect
wilderness
example of
and raped her at
truth
gunpoint.
being stranger than fiction.
She was 17.
The CIA now pushes its tradecraft to the limit as they set out to disguise and train 6 ordinary Americans
He
in
would
the art of
hunt me
escape.
down and kill me.
This is
He
the
told me he
real-life
was a
story of what
fine,
would later become
upstanding
an Oscar-winning
businessman.
Hollywood sensation.
He had never mentioned at
what
any
isn't
point
in the Hollywood version
during
are the
the rape
extraordinary
time
details
or
of an
before or
operation the
after that he was
CIA
married,
kept
but he
hidden
said
away
he was
in
a
classified
fine,
files
outstanding businessman, and that
until now.
I was just a kid.
the
Nobody
secret
would
story.
believe me.
of how the CIA
And he was
fooled
right.
everyone.
Everything the profiler said about the perpetrator of the serial killings fits suspect Robert Hansen, a truly dangerous man who was passing as a nondescript face in the crowd. While troopers zeroed in on Hansen, they spread out to search for more victims in the Knik River area, where 3 bodies had been found. They
In late
believed that the dancers who were still missing may
thousands
have
of
been buried
anti-American
close to the
protesters
other
in
grave
Iran
sites.
are gathering outside the
But
U.S.
troopers
Embassy.
came up empty. The area was too long
Demonstrations
and remote
against
to cover
America
completely.
are common.
Activate radio.
Iran is still in the
Despite
throes
the
of an
compelling
Islamic
FBI
revolution,
profile and the past police
and America
records,
is being accused of
lacked
aiding and
anything
abetting
tangible
the
to link
hated
Hansen to the
exiled
killing.
dictator, the
his
Shah
police
Reza
records were
Pahlavi.
too stale. The evidence too
This is one of
circumstantial to
hundreds of
hold any weight.
protests
or
organized by militant revolutionary students.
Investigators hoped that Cindy Paulson would be. She was
this
the
time-
only surviving victim to Hansen's current wave of violence. Perhaps she could remember something
Iran.
else.
The costume worn by Jim Carrey in The Grinch was
worst
so
gave another
difficult to
crisis in
wear
American
that the
history
comedian
begins.
had to
But
be
this-
professionally
she was
trained by the
able to
CIA.
wonder
When I did the
Hansen had
Grinch,
US Embassy
literally the
staff
makeup
escaped
was like being
and
buried
find their
alive.
way to the
every day.
house
The
of
first
Canadian
8
diplomats.
hours.
Hansen
And I went
not
back
been
to my
in
trailer and
training,
put my
great
leg through the
production for
wall.
more than
And I
10
told
years.
Ron Howard I couldn't
that
do
we were in hiding.
But in the hopes of strengthening their case and establishing a pattern of behavior,
When the Central
investigators searched
Intelligence
for another
Agency
of
learned
Hansen's
of the
victims
Americans
from
on the
years
run,
earlier, whose
they assigned one of
experience
their top
matched
escape
Paulson's.
agents, Tony Mendez.
Although this prior victim no longer lived in the area, troopers tracked her down and asked for her help.
I had gotten a call from Alaska asking if I would like to maybe help with a conviction for Mr.
We
Hansen.
are not that call.
They had explained to me that he had killed, to the best of their knowledge, 7 women. And they explained to me that the last woman
You cannot
had broken
control
free.
Heath with. We are not.
She agreed to testify when the time came, but troopers still had a weak case. Though troopers felt confident they were on the right track,
Okay, we need fuel for
they didn't have
sustenance.
enough to prove that Hansen was a serial killer.
We are.
According to Anchorage
That
Police
radio
Officer Greg
program
Baker,
is-
Hansen knew that authorities were onto something.
Okay, we need fuel.
One morning I
for
was driving
sustenance.
by and I needed to get some donuts for the shift.
Okay.
Mr. Hansen was there
the
and he had
police
a
are not me.
a
Are
window
they
that he
around
stood
right
in
now?
and decorated cakes and cupcakes and cookies. And I remember watching him. He kept looking up at me and you could tell he
We
was
are not
nervous.
the fire department.
And he kept putting frosting on his thumb. And I liked that.
What we'll do is
Although investigators had Hansen in their sights, they still lacked the evidence to connect him directly to the crimes.
All the information we can possibly.
But because Hansen matched the profile so closely, Douglas flew to Alaska to review the case and to brief the troopers and prosecutor Frank Rothschild on how to proceed with the suspect.
information that's already in front of him to release.
Douglas was confident that Hansen was their serial killer. The hunter was now the hunted.
So the mission was to provide a analysis for them. Does he have the capability to commit a crime like this? And the answer was yes. I believe this prostitute, and I believe he's capable of perpetrating these crimes.
Douglas's idea was to bring Hansen in for questioning while simultaneously searching his house. To obtain a warrant, investigators needed to list specific items they believed to be in the house. They knew to look for the gun that Cindy Paulson described, and the one that fired the bullets found in the graves of Sherry Morrow and Paula Goulding. That wasn't enough. They needed a home run, something that would prove Hansen's guilt in no uncertain terms. They asked Douglas if there was anything else to list in the warrant.
Yes, some of the research findings is we're dealing here with a serial killer. And serial killers, it starts off as fantasy. And one of the things to keep the fantasy going after the crime is because they're on the hunt nightly looking for victims, is they take some type of memento. We call them either souvenirs or trophies, something belonging to the victims.
We are not that call.
Douglas helped prosecutors write the affidavit based on the likelihood of finding mementos mentioned in the profile.
Anything else? I got those two.
Anything from a piece of the victim's jewelry to a driver's license.
We don't have any.
But a behavioral profile had never been used as the basis of a search warrant in the United States before. Rothschild knew he'd need to back it up with more conventional information.